Well, good afternoon, everybody. Good rainy afternoon. I'm just telling people this is why I don't live in Britain anymore. You get the idea. You just keep doing this for another, 3 or 4 or 5 months and non-stop, and you've got it. Anyway, this afternoon we have a much more cheerful topic. I'm delighted that Dr. Jay Morris is going to talk to us today about, apparently, lessons learned during 30 years. Jay Morris has spent at least 15 years in teaching in the K-12 system before spending another at least 15 years working for ODU, teaching us how to instruct our students. And we're really delighted to have that expertise with us here at the university. He has lifetime certificates in K-12 mathematics, physics, general science, and computer science. So it brings quite a broad range of experience from the K-12 system. And he's been recognized twice here as a most influential faculty member by computer science honors graduates. He's received the ODU Distinguished Educator Award in 2011 and several Gold Star Awards. He's also apparently, I'm told, a veteran of the U.S. Marine Corps, so we all better behave ourselves, right? Because you know how to handle us if we don't. And I'm sure that helps in the classroom, too.
Yes, it does.
I thought it might, yeah. And today's conversation, Jay Morris hopes to open a debate about the changing role of the professor in the classroom as we move away from the simple pedagogy of being a lecturer and pontificator, as it says here, but to be, in addition to providing information, also be a mentor, a role model, a counselor, sometimes an enforcer, and various other roles that the professor has to play. So I hope that you'll join in today's conversation. I'm looking forward to it. It's entitled Theory and Practice, Reaching the Modern Learner. So hand it over to you. Thank you.
When I was first asked by my department chairman if I would do this, I said no. But then he said there would be cookies, and I agreed. I'd like to thank the provost and thank you for allowing me to come here. I have some very unusual ways of looking at things. The discussion, I hope, the first half, I want to just sort of make sure we're all on the same page, looking at some of the history of teaching and some of the things from the past, and then we'll deal with what we're dealing with today, right, where we're going to be today. So I guess without any further ado, humbly presented by me. Lesson 1, PowerPoint presentations. First off, PowerPoint is not a technology. It is software. Calling it a technology is a little bit like calling Mega Man a technology or Doom. And the next one is always use clear and easy to read fonts and high contrast colors. And then the last was do not try to fit everything into one slide and blah, blah, blah. I won't do any of that, so just ignore those. This is not about PowerPoint. In fact, I rarely use them. Students, I know we use them as guides to help us in the classroom, help us more than them. Some students love them. They want us to use them as that this is how our lecture is going to be and don't say anything else. But for me, it's always about the aha moment, that extra bit when some kid, some student gets what you said and takes it to the next level. You need to capitalize on that. Jump on it and run with it and not be stuck in a pre-programmed lecture. Back in 1976, I actually met Madeline Hunter, a wonderful woman. I hated her at the time. These were her standard 7-step lesson plans. The reason I hated her was because I was teaching high school at the time, and our principal was requiring us to submit on Friday lesson plans for the following week, written in 7-step format. And of course, there are 8 steps in the 7-step lesson plan format. But it was useful. The anticipatory set, how you get them started at the very beginning of the class. Then you tell them what you're going to tell them, and then you teach them, and then you tell them what you taught them, and so on. 1984, she was ill by then, and she wrote a book, What's Wrong with Madeline Hunter, by Madeline Hunter. And the first thing she said was, I did not intend this to be an evaluation tool. This was intended to help teachers. These are things that you can do, not things that you should be scored by. And she also pointed out that this is only a third of this whole practice framework, right, for direct instruction, being that we have content and learner behaviors and teacher behaviors, and the whole 7-step lesson plan design was a teacher behavior document. Then going through NCATE accreditation and an accreditation twice here, those have very little to do with learner behaviors or teacher behaviors. They are about content. And so we sort of miss that middle bit, right? The whole thing about assessments. 1992, Paul Ramsden came up with the Learning to Teach in Higher Ed, and he came up with these wonderful bullets or points. You need to, for good instructors, good lecturers, good professors need to foster interest and concern and respect for their students, and have appropriate assessment. Now that's really hard. And I want to talk about that more in a little bit. You need to challenge them, but also allow independence, while at the same time controlling the classroom, and and you don't have to be afraid of learning from students. 2011, Mary Ellen Weimer, Mistaken Beliefs About Learning to Teach. Teaching is a gift. Everyone knows teaching is a curse. Mastering the techniques of teaching will be easy. It is after the first 30 years or so. And then you should teach like your best teacher. And actually, that is probably the greatest mistaken belief. All right, and then Benjamin Bloom and the whole synthesis and evaluation. And Lauren Anderson was a student of Benjamin Bloom's and sort of redid the taxonomy. Now, talk about assessments only briefly at this point. Educators call them field-tested learning assessments, or flags, and classroom assessment techniques, CATs. And you can go to that website, flagguide.org, and you will see various assessment documents and techniques that other teachers of all different types of topics have used successfully in the classroom and made available to teachers all across around the world, across the country and around the world. And finally, this is where I start to really get into the meat of it. You can see these are really terrible slides. I sort of violate every rule about making slides. Kenneth Bain wrote a book in 2004, What the Best College Teachers Do. First off, high expectations, but not just piling on mountains and mountains of work for no reason. The best teachers place learning ahead of doctrine and policy. Now that's a little dangerous. Wrong thinking is punishable. And they take advantage of their students' natural curiosity. But I like number 4. Memory is not a storage unit. It's not like the bits and bytes on a hard drive. And intelligence is not just looking those things up, right? It's not a database. Instead, learning is the construction of a model of reality within the person. Whether it's a mathematical reality or a physical reality or even an artistic one. Putting things together so that you can really get it. You have it put together in your head. Now, unfortunately, sometimes they put it together wrong. and you have to correct them. You know, they want to vote for Republicans and things, but you have to sort of adjust them. That was a joke. Not really. Okay. Continuing with Mr. Bain. The best teachers find out where the students are at the very beginning of the course. Frankly, for probably the first 29 years in teaching, I didn't do a lot of that. I assumed that they were there. That was maybe an exaggeration, first 20 years. But now you can't take anything for granted. We'd like to be able to assume that the previous courses or the previous universities had prepared them for your course. But it's not always true. A number of years ago, when I first came, I started teaching a course in numerical methods. And originally, the prerequisites were Calculus 3 and linear algebra. But they decided that was too hard, so they changed the prerequisites to Calculus 3 or linear algebra. Well, that was great, because now half my class knew matrices, and the other half knew PDEs. But nobody knew both. That was a lot of fun, because then I had to teach them both from scratch. Yes, ma'am.
All of your students aren't going to be at the same place.
No, they're not.
So who do you teach to?
You know, I think that is a hard question. And who do you teach to, like in that particular case? Well, the only thing I've been able to do is try to teach both subjects quickly, try to get them up to speed, ramp them up, make available extra documents or book recommendations to help them get caught up. You can't do that for them. And, we have specific learning objectives that are defined even by our course descriptions, and we have to teach those things. But those are a minimum. I think I say that later in another slide, that those things are the minimum that we should do, not the maximum. I admit that sometimes it's just hard to cram everything in there that you're supposed to do or that you want to do. So, but I sort of make myself feel better by saying, well, I'm going to do all this, but if I have to take a little bit of time and review a little bit at the beginning, I will. I like number 7, test their own line of reasoning for consistency, because most of mine isn't. But you do need to think about, especially in some of the other subject disciplines, am I really thinking clearly? Question yourself. And maybe this is an answer to your question. They ask themselves, what do you expect from the students when the semester is over? That's what you really have to teach to. That's your goal, right? And that meaningless goals and requirements are just that, meaningless. These are not my words. These are of Mr. Bain, and I like them. By the way, I read the book the first time in about 9 hours, straight through. I was fascinated by his views on things, and then I went back and read it again. Here's his 7 unifying principles. First, we need to create a critical learning environment. Now, that's a special word for him. What is a critical learning environment? Well, he says that it's one where people are not afraid to be wrong. And I demonstrate that almost every class. I'm usually wrong about something. And they wouldn't believe it, but sometimes I'm wrong on purpose. Because they need to see it's okay to make a mistake. And in fact, I was thinking about great failures, people that failed a lot. Thomas Edison, right? That one comes to mind. Frank Lloyd Wright. They don't give answers. They raise questions. And not the kind of question when they walk out of the room and say, what the hell was that about? But about, gee, I wonder how this relates to what I want to do. What has this got to do with databases or whatever? Back to Benjamin Bloom. We got to stress the highest intellectual activities. And unfortunately, so much of what we teach is at that bottom level. These are facts. This is how you, I teach a lot of low-level programming courses, and these are just facts that you have to know. The semicolon goes here. You know, you do this. I try to take those ideas and make them more easily accessible to the beginning coders, but I've learned you have to be careful. There's a way in C++ where you can invent your own variables. It's kind of cool. Make objects, right? Invent your own variables, and variables have attributes, and variables have behaviors. And when you're defining them, when you're inventing this new variable type, you have to put a semicolon at the end of this closing bracket. And if you don't, then life is not worth living, right? The world crumbles around us, and reality itself begins to fluctuate. So in order to get them to remember it, I called it the Supersecret semicolon of the gods. And they laughed, and I said, oh, good, they'll remember that, right? Well, about a year later, one of our more distinguished professors, and one of the smartest men I have ever known, Stephen Zeil, was telling a story about how he was in class and was showing some code, and he'd made a slight mistake, and he couldn't find it, and one of the students raised their hand and said, Professor, you forgot the Supersecret semicolon of the gods. And he thought the guy was on acid or something. So you have to be careful. Honestly, I really believe this, and I try to do this. I use my lectures to help them. I've got those goals. What I want them to know at the end, my labs, my lectures, everything I do, even my office hours, is all about helping them digest difficult, challenging problems and figure them out so that they can do stuff. Be valuable, be successful. Leave students with a question because there are always more questions. Make it okay to make mistakes, which I believe that both myself and Mr. Bain have stolen from that great American educator, Miss Frizzle, and the Magic School Bus. Get messy and make mistakes, right? And then make your solution the last solution. That's really hard. It was hard at first. But to let them, forcing them to come up with an answer, even if it's wrong, and you know it's going to be wrong, like writing numerical solvers in Java, or writing a Fortran compiler in COBOL. You just don't do that. That's nuts. But they need to explore that and make it part of their whole perception, their model of reality. All right, these are Morse's memories. These are things that I actually heard in my career. Are any of you math ed majors? Well, the highest grade you can get is a B. I was in a course in linear algebra. Apparently he didn't like math ed majors. Ah, yes, certainly something a first-year graduate student would ask. And I can tell you that was the last question I asked in there. Have you asked your friends while he's typing on a machine and clearly not listening to me? Have you, the TA? Well, talk to your friends again. I'm so sorry. It's only an 89.94. I just have no recourse. I cannot believe You are not familiar with Einsteinian indicial notation. Where did you do your undergraduate? He was really offended by that. I mean, it's like, and then he got turned around, he looked and he took a book about this thick out of his desk and he handed it to me and he said, read that. And he turned around and started working. He said, by Wednesday. That was when I had hair, right? Now these are words of wisdom, good things. And I've shamelessly stolen them and I can now take credit for them, so they're trademark. Plan backwards. Start with the outcomes. What do you want? And then figure out how to get it there. The average response time we give students is 0.9 seconds. Try to give them at least 3 seconds. What do you think about that? Well, let's move on. Actually, this has been consistent over the last 30 years. It's less than a second is what we give them because we're not comfortable with that dead air, right? So I usually sort of think about something else while I'm waiting for them to, what I'm going to have for dinner, or 3 seconds. 2001, 2002, 2003. That seems like not very long to think about a problem, but we have so much to do. We have so much things we want to cover, and I know I get excited when I'm teaching, and I just, want to move on. And this gets me in trouble. Examinations are not precision measurement tools. Yeah, I wish they were, but they're not, because I make them up, and I have a good time. I think it's fun. They say my exams are notoriously difficult, but I try to grade fairly. And I try to actually, to be honest, I do go back to that taxonomy, and I try to have at least one question at the end, that is this whole synthesis part. And if they can get that, it's an A, right? I knew professors who would make up 6 different versions of a quiz and assumed that they were all consistently equivalent, right? Just not. When you look at your students and they all have that 1,000-yard stare, take a commercial break and try it again. I actually consciously do this. And students think I just tell stories. But I'll tell you, when I'm doing numerical methods or artificial intelligence or anything else that's really difficult, and I'm all excited, and I'm writing stuff on the board and running around like a nut, and I turn around, they're all going. Then I go, oh, let me tell you about my grandma. She would really like this, Just let them do a core dump, right? That's what we say in computer science. Blow it down for a second, take a deep breath. Okay, now let's go back and let's see what I was really trying to tell you. Now, I do tell stories. And there's another reason I do that. Not only to give them that 30-second break, but also because they get to know me as a person. I normally don't dress like this, but I'm scared of the provost, so I wore a suit today. Usually much more relaxed. The students come to my room and we take the Zen state. These are other good things I've stolen and also take credit for. How many times have you entered a class with any questions only to be swamped after no one raises their hand and you say, class is over, and then, 15 people. I like that one. Move around the room, it makes them nervous. It does, doesn't it? Yeah. Actually, that is a real teaching technique, and it's called proximity. respond to a confrontational student. We've all seen them if you've been teaching for any time at all. And you just really look concerned and say, I understand, really I do, and then call security. Talk to your students. Talk to them outside of class, talk to them in the hallway, when you walk across campus. Treat them like they're thinking, feeling human beings, not freshmen. I do that, and I practice it. Honestly, I don't always know their names, but I make them feel like I know their names. Because actually, I do care. I did a little research this morning because I was curious. A couple of statistics about me. Since coming to ODU, I've worked every semester, every summer, and I've taught a total of 183 sections. And I only have one chili pepper on ratemyprofessor.com. And I think I got that because when I told them I didn't have any, I threatened that no one would pass. If every single person in your class just failed your exam, and maybe you made a mistake, gave the wrong test, or taught the wrong material, it's okay to toss it and try again. And honestly, I teach a course, CS 390 is Theory of Computation. And by practice, I have an exam 1, and then I have son of exam 1, right? Because they don't get it the first time. And so I use that. I know they're going to do that. They all screw it up, every single one of them. And they're just, because it's a different way of looking at the world, you know, finite state machines and all that junk. Those are actually some of the most fascinating courses to teach, is when this is all new, brand new, totally, not just a new extension to what came before, but something totally new for them. Turing machines and these I'm not too sure about. Making up examples as you go along or as you get feedback from your class can be very effective and unfortunately very dangerous. I do that. I can type in the dark, I can code on the fly, and I let them make suggestions on how they solve a particular problem, and you know, I'll come up with a new extension to the problem, and then it's not possible. Whoops. But that in itself can be a learning experience. I always write new exams for 2 reasons. A, it keeps it fresh and tuned to the current semester. That's what I tell my department chairman. And 2, I can never find last semester's anyway. One of my good friends, Professor Brunel, who knows me quite well, found out I was doing this. She says, really, what's the topic? I said, organizational skills. And she almost passed out. Own your mistakes. I mentioned that earlier. Own your mistakes. And I have done them on purpose. They think it's funny, and it keeps them involved. And finally, here we go. Maybe we can have some debate here. I start with the learning objectives. Learning objectives give you teaching strategies and then examples and questions. But you always start with what you want at the end. And as we said earlier, consistent course objectives across multiple sections are important, but they are the minimum, not the maximum. And we have had serious arguments. I mean, we had 2 professors challenge each other to a duel over this one, that they wanted to require identical presentations across multiple sections. We need to use the same PowerPoint slides. And I go, power what? And I understand in mathematics why they want to have consistent evaluations, the same final across because you've got 37 sections. I understand that. But I just question, and I'm open to be convinced either way, but I question if I'm teaching a class and the provost is teaching the same class, and we both have the same minimal set, but then I extend it this direction and she extends it that direction, how can we give the same exam? We can give the same base skills. You know, maybe the math people each could have the same basic subset, and then each professor could add their own bits and pieces in that they have done. There are certain subjects that I'll cover, for example, in 417, that some semesters the kids just, we don't get there. They're not in the basic course description, but I like to do them if I can. Subspace methods, for example. I mean, if you've got a bunch of kids who are really sharp, you know, sometimes you get that group that just really clicks and you think, I got it. And then Karma comes up the next semester and says, no, you don't. The goal of education is not performance on an exam. Learning is the goal of education. Do exams truly prove everything to us? I've had graduate courses at Yale, and the entire course was one grade, one exam. And if you got lucky and they asked the stuff you knew, you got a good grade. This last one is something I believed since I first started teaching, which was in a 7th and 8th grade self-contained learning disability and behavior disorder class. Woo! 5 of my students were felons. That was an interesting semester. Kids with emotional problems, kids with learning problems. You just wanted them to get a little further, you know, to have some success. So, recommendations. Don't get stuck. Nothing was more frustrating to me than I knew several teachers that taught 6 sections of geometry every day for 30 years. And I thought, oh my God, that's got to just drive a person nuts. I mean, it just gets old. I like to try new classes, and our department has been very understanding when I try to come up with a new course. Graph theory, for example, and sometimes they work, and sometimes they're not so good. Actively interact with your students, not like I'm doing today because I can't get you to talk to me, but get them to talk to you. Learn from the other teachers. Learn from them, but don't try to be them. Our students are, I mean, when I was their age, I was an idiot. But these kids today, they know a fake. They may not know what you're talking about, but they know when you're faking it. So learn the methodologies, learn the way that people who are effective, what they do, and then absorb what you can. Just like Madeline Hunter said, here's my 7 things, take what you can from it and make yourself a better teacher. They actually had a professor, he was only with us for a year, and they asked him to sit in on my class and to learn how to teach CS, I don't know, 150 or 250 or something. And after the first lecture, he came up and he said, that was great, but I can't do that. And I said, well, I didn't do a whole lot. And he says, yeah, but I can't type in the dark. And so I said, well, you know what? You don't have to do that. Turns out he was crazy, but that was another issue. Because we've always done it that way is not an acceptable answer. I've been accused of being an iconoclast, and probably correctly. I've also been unjustly accused of being a flirt by my wife, but we won't get into that. This is the hard one. Care enough about your students to not let someone pass who isn't ready for what comes next. You're not doing them a favor if they just don't get it. Find other teachers in your department who are willing to allow you to observe their classes and then borrow what works and adapt them to your delivery mode. You might be a PowerPoint wizard, or you might be, a whiteboard genius. However you teach, you need to be you, your style. There's so many different ways of doing things. And you know what? I honestly believe that makes college better. We should all be different. I'm not Steve Zeil, and he's not anyone that I can think of. He's brilliant and scary. He's a little guy, but he scares the bejeebers out of me. He's just so smart. And he's kind and nice. It just makes me sick. I'm kidding. Be a human first and a teacher second. Help your students to climb those hurdles, not just sit back and watch them flail against them like the Greeks at the walls of Troy. Help them into that horse. Help them win. I want them to win. They're always surprised, because I root for them. I'm a big cheerleader and former wrestling coach and football coach. And I say, all right, we got to practice. You just can't learn how to code by reading a book. You have to type it. Theory is great. And in fact, in the words of the great American philosopher Yogi Berra, in theory is as good as practice. But in practice, theory ain't, right? My other favorite quote is from the great American philosopher and sociologist Alphonse Scarface Capone, who said, "It's easier to get what you want with a smile and a gun than by a smile alone." And you have a gun. And that completes the slides, but I just want to sort of finish up by saying there's so many good things going on here at this university in all sorts of classrooms, all across the campus. And if we could find some way to, first off, any of you are welcome in my classroom at any time. Except maybe the provost. But no, I'm kidding. Everybody's welcome. But just keep in mind that what may look haphazard is often planned. Some students like me. Some students really. It turns out that typically either the weaker students or the really gifted students. The weaker students like it because I explain things in real terms. I think I have a good ability at that. That's one of the things I am good at, is coming up with multiple explanations and, common sense explanations for a thing. For just yesterday I did my favorite lecture. And it's actually about manipulating some of those invented variables I told you about earlier. Class is called a linked list, right? And linked lists, students hated them, because it's one data object connected to another, connected to another, connected to another, connected to another. So I make a class dude. And a dude has attributes and behaviors. They have height and weight and eye color, and they take control of the remote, and they drink beer, and they do all these things, and this is a dude. And then we have pointers. And pointers tell dudes what to do. And so they remember it. I choose some young lady out of class. Is this a dude? No. This is a dude pointer. What's your name? Gladys. Great. Gladys has a name. I say, Gladys, make a new dude. And so she points at some guy. And I said, what's your name? And he says, Fred. And I go, no, wrong. You don't have a name. And then we tell him to stand on one leg and do this sort of stuff, all through Gladys, right? And then I say, all right, Gladys, tell your dude to make a new dude. So the dude makes another dude, and I say, what's your name? And he says, Frank. And I go, wrong! You don't have a name, right? And by the time, unfortunately, one class, this is sort of the dangerous part, I was running out of dudes. They were still giving me their name. And I go, no, you don't have a name either, right? And finally some kid says, I don't have a name. Right. And then you need another dude pointer, another young lady, and you set her equal to the first lady. Does that mean that they're both the same person? No, it means they're both pointing at the same dude. They can both tell the dude what to do. And then one dude stays here, and the other, or dude pointer stays here, and the other pointer moves down the chain. And you know what? I got a call. I've used that example for a number of years. I got a call from a lady who's now a project director at one of the shipyards. And she says, I used your example in a meeting the other day. And I really like that. They remember. They remember. I got to say that I was lucky. I am lucky. I love my job. Please don't fire me. My father told me once, he was sick and he was near the end of his life, and he said, son, I've been a machinist for 56 years. And he said, my only prayer for you is that you can find a job that every day you get up and you don't go to work. And I've got that. This isn't work for me. I love it. I love the students. They're different every semester. I don't love all the students, but some of them. And I really do want them to succeed. And I think, can I be improved? Absolutely, because I'm atrocious. And every year that goes by, another year, I think I get better because I try to get better. One last bit of advice came from Chris Wilde. He's now retired from our department. And I was upset after teaching a course one semester, and he says, don't worry about it. He says, you'll have to teach it 3 times before you know what you're doing. And when you teach it 5 times, it's time to teach something else. So you get 2 times where you get it right. Okay. And then you need a break. Well, be yourself. Learn from each other. That's my point. Thank you. Any questions?
Comments, questions? Well, let me tell you, I'm Allison Shea. That's not what I need to tell you, but I'm Allison Shea from the Center for Learning and Teaching, and I'm not sure even you know that the Faculty Summer Institute this year includes keynote speaker Ken Bain.
Oh, wow!
Yes, so he's coming. There is some information about it on the little high table as you're leaving. If you enjoy this kind of a forum to talk about teaching, that's what the Summer Institute is. It's at the TED this year. Where am I? At the TED this year. It's 2 days of sitting with faculty, of sharing thoughts and ideas, and listening to keynote speakers and welcomes, and you are more than welcome. We are looking for presenters, so if you have great ideas, our topic this year is bridging the gap between teaching and learning. So think about what you might do. Be part of a panel discussion, lead a workshop, give a presentation. We'd love to have you. So there's lots of information. Thank you very much, Jay Morris.
Thank you. Thank you.